My fiancée said, "You've changed since we moved in." So I showed her who really did, the silence, the criticism, the manipulation. I didn't change, I just stopped pretending her love wasn't conditional. That night, she met the man she created. My fiancée said, "You've changed since we moved in." I told her, "Maybe I just stopped pretending your love was unconditional." My name's Nick. I'm 31, a software engineer from Austin, Texas. We've been together 5 years, living together for 2. The first year felt like partnership. The second felt like probation. Grace wasn't always like this. When we met, she was magnetic, laughing at dumb movie quotes, dancing barefoot in my kitchen, texting me little drawings she made during her lunch breaks. I thought I'd found someone who saw me. Then the tests began. Started small. She'd sigh whenever I ordered black coffee instead of oat milk lattes. "You never treat yourself," she'd say, but it didn't sound like concern. It sounded like accusation. Then came the comparisons. Tom used to bring me flowers just because. Tom, her ex, became the ghost roommate in our relationship. At first, I tried to meet the standard. I sent her flowers, learned her favorite wine, even started wearing button-downs because she said hoodies made me look like I'd given up. It was never enough. Every nice thing became the new baseline. Then came the digs. They started in private jokes about how I wasn't assertive enough or masculine in the right ways. I brushed them off, thinking maybe it was stress. But the public ones cut deeper. At my coworker's birthday dinner, she leaned across the table and said loud enough for everyone, "Maybe Nick will finally act like a real man and stop being so cheap." The table laughed. I forced a smile, felt the heat crawl up my neck. She clinked her glass against mine and whispered, "Relax, babe, it's just humor." When we got home, I told her that wasn't okay. She rolled her eyes. "You're too sensitive. Everyone jokes. Why do you take things so personally?" A few days later, she posted a story. "If your man can't afford almond milk lattes, he's just a roommate." Her followers, mostly coworkers and old college friends, filled the comments with laughing emojis and "preach." I watched the likes climb like a pulse. It wasn't about the latte. It was about the quiet message beneath it. "You're not enough." That night, I scrolled through her page and realized half her captions were thinly veiled complaints about me. Some people fear strong women. If he wanted to, he would. Each post gathered support from people who'd never met me. I felt erased, replaced by a caricature she'd built for her audience. The next morning, she handed me a smoothie and kissed my cheek like nothing had happened. I stood there in my own kitchen, thinking how easily cruelty became content. She used to send me morning texts that said, "Can't wait to see you." Now it was, "Did you pay the electric bill?" Or "Remember to iron your shirt before dinner tonight." I used to think change was growth. But standing there watching her stir collagen powder into her drink, I realized some change is erosion. Slow, subtle, grinding down the parts of you that once felt alive. She said I'd changed. Maybe I had. But the truth was simpler. I stopped performing for someone who treated affection like a reward for obedience. And that was the first night I slept on the couch. Not because we fought, but because I needed distance from the version of me she was building. Grace used to call herself a marketing strategist. But a few months after moving in, she quit to rediscover herself. That rediscovery turned into endless days of yoga mats, incense, and self-help podcasts. While I quietly covered rent, utilities, groceries, and the occasional $800 pottery for mindfulness workshop she swore would change her vibration. When I'd ask about job prospects, she'd smile serenely. "Money isn't everything, Nick. You focus too much on the material." Easy to say when someone else paid the bills. I told myself it was temporary, that she'd find purpose again. But the weeks blended into months, and every time I mentioned our finances, she accused me of being controlling. "You're acting like I'm lazy," she'd say, lying on the couch surrounded by open journals and half-burned candles. "I'm acting like rent's due," I'd reply. She'd sigh like I didn't get it. "You're stuck in scarcity energy. That's why you're always stressed." Meanwhile, my work hours stretched longer. 10-hour coding sprints, late-night bug fixes, morning stand-ups that blurred into evening merges. I'd come home exhausted, greeted not by warmth but by critique. You wear that hoodie again? Real men look successful. It's not a hoodie, Grace. It's a pullover. Exactly my point. Her new friends didn't help. Influencer types she met in workshops, always filming, always talking about manifesting abundance. They dropped by unannounced, filling our small apartment with ring lights and kombucha bottles. One Friday, I came home to find them rearranging our furniture for better flow. Grace looked up, beaming. Babe, we're cleansing the energy. Don't be such a Capricorn about it. I stood in the doorway, holding my laptop bag, feeling like a guest in my own home. The nights grew quieter between us. She stopped asking about my projects. I stopped asking about her day. Every conversation risked becoming a lecture about how masculine energy stifles creativity. Then came the dinner ambush. She texted me at 5 p.m. Hey, a few people are coming over at 6. Just something chill. I was in the middle of debugging a client app, but I shut down early, ran to the store, and grabbed pasta, wine, and whatever looked vaguely impressive. By the time I got home, 6 people were already there, barefoot on my carpet, sipping rose from my coffee mugs because they didn't want to disrupt the aesthetic. Grace was filming everything. Smile, babe. Everyone needs to see how we live. So I cooked, boiled, stirred, plated. She barely glanced up. The camera stayed on her, her smile practiced and distant. When the plates hit the table, someone asked, "Wow, did you cater this?" Grace laughed. "No, my domestic king here made it." Laughter. Clinking glasses. Another round of ring lights flicking on. I stood there, pretending it didn't sting. Pretending I wasn't the unpaid help in my own kitchen. After they left, she sighed dramatically. "You totally killed the vibe with your attitude." My attitude? Yeah, you were all tense. People feel that. It's like negative energy, you know? I wanted to ask if negative energy paid the electric bill, but I didn't. I just nodded, cleaned the dishes she left piled in the sink, and went to bed alone. That night, I scrolled her latest post. A smiling photo of her on our couch, captioned, "You attract what you tolerate. Protect your peace, ladies." Hundreds of likes. A dozen comments calling her queen. And there I was in the background of the photo, blurry but visible, holding a pan, mid-turn toward the sink. They called it empowerment. I called it erosion. Her favorite phrase was, "I'm just worried about you." But what she meant was, "I'll decide for you." It started with clothes. "Those sneakers look childish," she'd say. "Try the loafers I picked." If I hesitated, she'd pout. "I just want you to look successful, Nick. Why are you fighting me on this?" Then it was my schedule. She'd text midday, "Lunch?" If I said I had a meeting, she'd reply, "It's like you're married to your laptop." If I went quiet too long while coding, she'd FaceTime just to check in. Sometimes she'd tilt her head and ask, "Who are you with?" As if my office background might confess something. When I traveled for work, 3 days in Denver, she called every night, then every hour. "Miss you," she'd say. Then, "Who's that woman's voice?" "You at a bar." It was the hotel receptionist. The next morning she tweeted, "Some guys forget they have girlfriends as soon as they see a woman in a dress." I saw it before my flight. My name wasn't there, but everyone knew. The comments were all fire emojis and, "Dump him, queen." When I got home, she was waiting outside our building. Makeup perfect, fury sharper. "You humiliated me. Everyone saw how you looked at her." "The project manager?" I said. She was explaining software licensing. Grace's voice cracked in the courtyard. "You flirted. You touched her arm." I handed her a pen. Neighbors peeked through blinds. Old Mr. Bob shook his head, muttered "Jesus," and retreated indoors. Later, she cried into my chest and whispered, "I just love you too much. That's why I get like this." That line worked the first few times. Not anymore. I suggested couples therapy. She agreed, then turned it into theater. At the first session she crossed her legs, smiled sweetly, and said to the therapist, Nick's emotionally unavailable. He's distant. I think he's scared of me. The therapist raised an eyebrow toward me. I said nothing. Years of debugging code had trained me to sit still while chaos unraveled. Grace filled the silence with practiced tears. I just want connection. But he keeps shutting me out. Afterward, in the parking lot, she beamed. See? Even a professional gets that I'm right. That night I lay awake, realizing therapy had given her a new vocabulary to weaponize. Everything became pathology. My calm was avoidance. My frustration was toxic masculinity. My silence, emotional neglect. Meanwhile, she spent hours online reading threads about divine femininity and reclaiming power. She started quoting influencers like scripture. Men are meant to provide stability, she'd lecture. Women are the emotional architects. If we collapse, it's because you failed to hold space. Grace, I said once, I'm not your therapist. I'm your fiancé. She smiled without warmth. Exactly. You're supposed to be both. One evening I came home to find her phone propped on the counter, camera rolling. She was mid-rant for her followers about energy imbalances in relationships. I realized she wasn't talking to me anymore. She was performing for them. When the video ended, she turned to me like flipping a switch. Can you make dinner? I'm starving. I cooked while she edited captions. She never looked up. Later, scrolling Instagram, I saw myself again. This time just my hands plating her food. The caption read, "When your man finally learns to nourish your feminine side, nail polish sparkles." 15,000 views. Control doesn't always come with yelling. Sometimes it's disguised as concern, or validation, or love wrapped in apology. It's a leash that feels like a hug until you try to move. By then, I was already tugging against it. After the public scene outside our building, I started counting days instead of moments. I'd wake up and think, one more day until the next apology, one more day until the next explosion. That kind of math eats at you. I still hoped therapy would help. Grace agreed instantly, eager to post a mirror selfie captioned, "Doing the work." She tagged our location. I remember sitting in the waiting room while hearts trickled into the notification bubble on her phone. Session 1 lasted 45 minutes but felt longer. The therapist asked why we were there. I started to speak. Grace cut in smoothly. My fiancé's emotionally unavailable. He withholds affection to control me. I blinked. It was rehearsed, each word a blade wrapped in silk. The therapist turned to me. Nick, is that accurate? I could have listed everything. The insults, the policing, the public humiliation. Instead, I said, we communicate differently. Grace smiled like a cat that caught a mouse. See? He admits it. Afterward, in the parking lot, she squeezed my hand. That went really well. She totally understood me. I thought therapy was for us. It is, she said, already opening Instagram. But you can't fix a relationship until you fix the man. That night she poured wine and announced she'd found the perfect wedding venue. I nearly choked. We hadn't even discussed a date. You're serious? I asked. Of course. We can book it now and manifest the rest later. She spun her laptop toward me. Oak beams, fairy lights, 10 grand deposit. Picture our first dance here. I pictured a cage with twinkle lights. When I didn't answer, she frowned. You're doing it again. That blank thing. It's like you're not even here. I'm here, Grace. Just thinking. Thinking kills energy. She went back to typing, humming along to some affirmation playlist. I stared at the booking page and felt my stomach twist. Over the next weeks, the pressure built quietly. She'd leave bridal magazines open on my desk, sprinkle wedding podcasts into my car's Bluetooth history. Every suggestion came sugar-coated. Just to get ideas, babe. Meanwhile, I stopped sleeping well. The couch became my refuge, half habit, half shield. She'd joke online about my snoring exile, turning our distance into content again. One night, I came home late after a brutal deployment cycle. She was on the couch with 2 friends, bottles scattered, discussing color palettes. Nick, she called. Which shade feels more like eternal devotion, Cream or bone? I said I was too tired. She laughed to her friends. See? Emotionally unavailable. They laughed too. Later, when they left, I found the engagement ring catalog in the trash. Her note scribbled on the cover. If he cared, he'd know my size. Something in me cooled. It wasn't anger anymore, it was clarity. The next day, I asked our therapist for a solo session. She listened quietly as I described the pattern. The control, the public ridicule, the endless rewriting of reality. When I finished, she said softly, "Nick, you're describing emotional abuse." Hearing the words spoken aloud landed like truth wrapped in relief. I drove home with the windows down, air cold against my face, wondering how I'd missed the obvious. Grace greeted me at the door, bright-eyed. Guess what? I booked a tasting at the venue. I looked at her and realized I wasn't afraid anymore. The crack had widened into daylight. Cancel it, I said. She froze. What? We're not booking anything. Her smile twitched. You're tired. You'll feel different tomorrow. But I didn't. And for the first time, that certainty felt like peace. A week later, she said it again. You've changed. This time, there was no accusation in her tone. Just disbelief. Like she couldn't recognize what she'd built. She stood by the window, arms folded over one of her linen robes, the kind she called ritual wear. Morning light poured through the blinds, soft and pale, dust floating between us like snow. She stared at me the way people look at something they used to own. You're cold, she said quietly. You're distant. You don't make me feel special anymore. I didn't argue. There was nothing left to defend. I didn't change, Grace, I said. I just stopped pretending your love was free. Her face hardened. Wow, so now I'm manipulative. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. You think it. She started pacing. You act like I'm the enemy, Nick. Like everything I do is an attack. I just wanted to help you grow. You've turned into this robot. She said robot like it was an insult, but the word felt right. Machines don't flinch. Machines don't beg to be understood. Machines don't break every time someone calls them too sensitive. Maybe that's the man you wanted, I said. Efficient, predictable, quiet. Grace grabbed her phone, typed furiously. The screen's reflection flickered across her face. Later I'd see her story. Some people mistake your boundaries for cruelty. She threw clothes into a suitcase. You're ruining my life, she shouted, half crying, half performing. Do you even care what you're losing? I didn't answer, because I finally understood. What we had wasn't love. It was compliance dressed as partnership. The door slammed hard enough to rattle the picture frames. I sat on the couch and listened to the silence expand. At first, it felt like a vacuum, heavy, unnatural. Then it shifted. My breathing slowed. The air didn't feel like walking on eggshells anymore. I looked around the apartment. The dried eucalyptus she'd hung for cleansing. The pink throw pillows I never liked. The ring light leaning against the bookshelf. All props from her life as the woman who had it all. Without her voice filling every corner, I could finally hear smaller sounds. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint buzz of the hallway light, my own heartbeat. They were ordinary, grounding, human. That night I slept in the bed alone. No perfume cloud, no passive-aggressive sigh when I turned over too quickly. Just quiet. The next morning, I found she'd unfollowed me, blocked me on everything, and posted a quote. Sometimes you have to lose yourself to find your worth. Her followers flooded the comments. So proud of you, Queen. He didn't deserve your energy. I scrolled without feeling anything. For the first time, her words didn't hook me. By noon, she texted. I left some things behind. Can you pack them for me? I placed her yoga blocks, journals, and 2 framed affirmations into a single box. On top, I left a sticky note. Take care of yourself. When she arrived, she didn't look at me, just grabbed the box and whispered, You really don't feel anything? I feel relief. Her eyes filled. You'll regret this. Maybe, I said, but at least the regret will be mine. She left without another word. The echo of the door closing was softer this time. Less of a slam, more of a release. I stood there for a long minute, barefoot on the cold tile, realizing I didn't want to fill the silence again. It wasn't loneliness. It was recovery. Grace once said she wanted to help me evolve. Maybe she did. She sculpted a version of me who finally knew the difference between peace and submission. The man she created didn't beg. He just began. 6 months later, the apartment finally feels like mine. No pink pillows. No crystals on the windowsill. No scent of moon phase candles that made every room smell like burnt vanilla and patchouli. Just space. Quiet, uncurated space. The first few weeks alone were strange. I'd catch myself listening for her footsteps, the rhythm of her voice rising and falling through another self-help podcast. Then silence would answer, and I'd realize I didn't miss her. I missed routine. There's a difference. I sold the ring light on Facebook Marketplace to a college student for $50. He asked if it came from a content house. I said, something like that. Grace emailed twice a week at first. The tone kept mutating. Apologies that bled into accusations, then back to longing. You've become the man I made you, she wrote once. Maybe she's right. The man she made stopped begging for peace and started enforcing it. Her final email arrived on a Sunday morning. You'll never find someone who loves you like I did. I didn't reply because I hoped she was right about that, too. Life rebuilt itself quietly. I started running again before work. The rhythm helped me think less, breathe more. I reconnected with friends she'd called draining. Turns out they just noticed how much of me I'd given up. One night, over beers, my friend Drew asked, "Do you ever wonder if she'll change?" I shrugged. People don't change for the better when control worked for them. At the office, my focus sharpened. My boss joked that heartbreak must be a performance enhancer. I laughed but didn't correct him. The truth was simpler. Peace is productive. You stop wasting bandwidth on crisis management. The apartment grew into something new. Shelves of books I actually read, a secondhand guitar, mismatched mugs that didn't need to match anything. I learned to enjoy small messes again. Grace still floats around the edges of my digital life. Mutual friends send screenshots sometimes. Her new coaching business, pastel-toned reels about radical self-love. Each caption feels like she's rewriting our story, painting herself as the survivor of an emotionally unavailable man. Let her. Narratives are currency online, and I'm not bankrupt enough to argue. Once, curiosity got the better of me. I watched one of her videos. She sat cross-legged, talking softly to the camera about healing from partners who fear feminine power. In the reflection of her eye, I could see the ring light I'd sold. Same halo, different student. I closed the app and went for a run. Every so often, I still hear her words. You've changed, but now they land differently. Change isn't betrayal. Sometimes it's correction. She mistook obedience for love, and I mistook her control for care. Both of us were wrong, but only one of us kept learning. I kept one thing from our time together. A small clay bowl she made in that overpriced pottery class. It's uneven, thumb-printed, still carrying the shape of her hands. I use it to hold spare keys and pocket change, things I can afford to lose. Sometimes, when light hits it just right, the glaze glimmers faintly pink. I don't see her in it anymore. I see proof that even imperfect things can be useful once you stop trying to make them perfect. I didn't become colder. I became clear. Love shouldn't be an audit, a test, a performance review. It should be quiet like breathing, easy to fail when you overthink it, effortless when it's real. Grace taught me the price of silence. I learned to pay it gladly, because in that silence, I finally heard something I hadn't in years. My own voice, steady and unafraid, saying, "Enough."